A 34-year-old makes up to $167 an hour nannying for the mega rich. I could work just 2 months a year and be fine. Isn't that crazy? So let's check this out. When Gloria Richard isn't acting on off Broadway stages, she travels with billionaires' kids, often whom she's never met, across the world. Richard spends half of each year nannying for the ultra wealthy to supplement her income between off Broadway and one woman shows in New York City and Virginia. The gig pays her up to $167 per hour, plus covered flights and accommodations. She says meeting that caring for billionaires' children makes up 80% to 90% of her annual income. I could nanny for like 2 months at the top of the year, and I'd be fine for the rest of the year. Richards, 34, tells CNBC Make It. What feeds me is being able to work so closely with these kids. Richard's job is atypical by most definitions, from the pay to the responsibilities. Nannying for the ultra wealthy isn't always about childcare. She spends most of her working hours coordinating children's educational and social calendars. She gets paid up to $2,000 per day for 12 to 15 hours of work. That's crazy. That is some really, really nice money. She travels the road by private jets and yachts, drives Porsches and Teslas on the job, and attends toddlers' birthdays where iPads are party favors. The glamour comes with an emotional tax. Richards often acts as a companion for neurodivergent children with absent and complicated parents, she says. And as a black woman helping raise wealthy white kids, she has to navigate cultural situations tactfully or risk losing her paycheck. Here's how she makes it work. So, on the job logistics. Some of Richard's clients are famous actors whom she never formally meets. Now, that's kind of weird. One of them was so constantly surrounded by security guards and makeup artists that she only caught glimpses of the top of the client's head over the course of her 3 month employment, she says. Like, isn't that kind of like depressing in a way? Like, say you were to ever get to that point where you are deemed like a celebrity or like a famous actor, to the point where you had to have armed security around you like 24/7, and you were doing makeup artists all the time. Like they were like all around you. Like, I don't know about you, but I would prefer to have some sort of privacy. This just seems kind of like way over the top. Like, to the point where like you wouldn't even want to deal with it at that point. So she's watched other clients spontaneously buy homes on layovers and take single bites of $3,200 steaks, she adds. Now, this is the interesting thing, right? A lot of people might be thinking, like, $3,200 on a steak? Like, are you mad? Are you crazy? Like, why would anyone ever spend that type of money on a steak? What people need to understand is not about the cost of the item, it's the cost of the item in terms of ratio to your income, right? This might be like a normal person spending like 10 cents on a piece of candy, right? Compared to the super wealthy person or the mega rich person. Like, that's what people need to understand. Like, the ratio is the only thing that matters, right? Like, for example, if you are like spending like 25% of your take home every year, well, as your income increases, that actual dollar amount gets drastically different, right? So, like, let's say that you are making, for easy math, like $100,000 a year, right? Well, 25% of $100,000 is $25,000. But now let's say that your take home is $1 million a year, but you still got that 25% ratio. Well, now you're spending $250,000 a year, right? So that dollar amount is way different than the 25 grand, but the ratio is the exact same. So they're not necessarily living beyond their means. They're basically living a-okay. So just something to really think about. Like as long as you keep the ratios the same, it doesn't really matter the dollar amount. So on her first day as a nanny to the ultra wealthy, she showed up at an airport, got introduced to the family's children, and instantly became their chaperone on a private jet to a rented out resort in Barbados. Wow. So the people were so wealthy, rented out a resort. You have to be filthy rich to be able to do that. Richards, who typically worked with roughly 10 families at a time, says it took her a while to understand exactly what her job responsibilities were. Unless the family is short staffed, she doesn't wipe up spills, prepare meals, or open car doors. Rather, she's a social coordinator and often an emotionally supportive mother figure. Once, parents actually listed their child in an Italian boarding school under her last name, she says. I've had full blown interviews where parents are like, we're looking for someone to raise our kids, she says. They tell me they had kids to pass on their trust funds, and that I'll hang out with them after boarding school when they can drink. What? Like, there's so many weird things within this kind of statement, right? Where these people basically said, like, oh, we're looking for someone to actually raise our kids for us, meaning we don't want anything to do with them. Also, we only had kids to pass on the trust funds. Yeah, we only had these like little creatures that came from our bodies because we wanted to transfer our money to them, pass it along the line, heritage and all that kind of stuff, the bloodline. Like what the hell? Backed by contracts. Richards grew up one of 8 siblings and landed her first professional acting role at age 14. Says she came by nannying organically. When she moved to New York more than a decade ago, she worked in the child care department of a Reebok sports club, which was later acquired by Equinox. Some of the members were affluent families who started asking her to babysit. She had no idea what to charge or how to secure regular nannying jobs. Her research eventually led her to Madison Agency, a New York based household staffing firm. Her willingness to travel and passion for working with neurodivergent children made her an alluring candidate, says Medicine Agency Director of Operations Jackie Mann. Richards also has the kind of extraordinary personality needed for working with billionaires, Mann adds. Sometimes when Richards is abroad, employers will blindside her by cutting off her pay or her international phone plan or completely neglect her previously agreed upon work hours, she says. Jesus. Some of them simply don't realize Richards will miss bill payments if she isn't paid promptly, she theorizes. Others may distrust their own staff because people have used them purely for their money before. I'll be in like Switzerland and they're telling me they can't pay me for 3 weeks because they don't have cash, Richards says. That's also how they communicate when they don't like something you did, they'll stop paying you. Wow. That's when the Madison agency's backing becomes essential, Richards says, making sure she gets her money in a timely manner, even after one client purposefully signed the wrong name on a check to escape payment. Like, so you are a mega rich, super rich individual, and you don't want to pay your bill to the person that is taking care of your kids. What kind of scumbag do you gotta be to not pay the person on time that is taking care of your bloodline? Does that make any amount of sense at all? Financial pros, emotional cons. Balancing her mental well being with unpredictable client mood swings is taxing, Roger says, but after living in billionaires' worlds for more than 10 years, she says she has empathy for most of them. Many of her clients were born into wealth and fame, And despite efforts to be normal, they can't walk into grocery stores or commercial airports without being verbally and physically assaulted. That understanding is what makes Richards an invaluable employee, Mann says. Can you imagine just like living your life where everywhere you go, you're going to be assaulted verbally and physically? That would be horrible. The competency one has to care for a child isn't uncommon, Mann says, but the qualities it takes to work for the ultra wealthy is patience and a nuanced perception of anticipating a person's needs. When Richards first starts working with new clients, she gradually shares personal stories to build trust with the parents and children. But even then, she still has to be on guard, she says. I've had families go through an immense amount of grief in the public eye. I'm watching their divorces or deaths within their family, she says. Sometimes I'm literally a shoulder to cry on. A second later, they'll turn on me. The racial dynamics can get messy too, she adds. I'm a black woman, and there are many times that I'm working for white families, and by the time the kids are 6 or 7, they have very specific thoughts about people who look like me. The money, thorough travel, and opportunities to help even difficult children are enough to keep Richards around, she says. She sets firm boundaries around how much and when she's willing to work, and when she's off the clock. Splurges on smoothies and massages as a form of self care. I have to be very mindful that even though it's in an intimate setting, it's still a job, Richard says. Honestly, this was actually really interesting. That was like very interesting. But I guess it kind of comes down to like, what are you willing to do in terms of money? Now, the cool aspect about this, which I think is the coolest aspect, is that she's able to make so much money in a short amount of time that she basically could free up the majority of her year, which is basically what she does, so that she could focus on uh, acting or dancing and whatnot. Right? So it's a pretty cool idea. It's kind of like similar to how some welders will go to like an on-site job where they're there for like 6 months and then literally have the rest of the 6 months of the year completely to themselves, where like they could basically do whatever they want. They could literally just basically do nothing. I think I've seen somewhere where some welders could take on a job, like a contract, where they could get paid like 100 grand in 6 months, and then basically go literally do whatever they want to do for the rest of the year, which is crazy, crazy. But if you're able to manage your money like that, why not? Because basically, it's like you have like a semi-retirement type of schedule on a yearly basis, which is pretty nice. If you want to learn how to get a debt and master your money, go to 40inbox.com or into the description below. Subscribe for more financial commentary.